The crystal glasses clinked against fine china as my family gathered for our monthly dinner at Le Maison, the kind of restaurant where the menu didn't bother listing prices. My father, James Harrison, CEO of Harrison Global, sat at the head of the table, radiating the same imposing presence that had dominated boardrooms for 30 years. My mother, Elizabeth, draped in designer labels, sat to his right, while my successful siblings flanked them like perfectly positioned chess pieces. I adjusted my simple black dress, Armani, though they'd never recognize that, and took my usual seat at the far end of the table as far from the center of power as possible. The wine steward poured everyone else aged Bordeaux while I received the house red without asking. Even the staff knew their hierarchy. "So Michael," my father began, addressing my older brother, "how's the merger going?" Michael straightened his custom-tailored suit. "The Stewart acquisition is proceeding exactly as planned. By next quarter, Harrison Global will control 30% of the tech market." "That's my boy," father beamed. "And Victoria, darling, how's the expansion?" My sister flashed her perfect smile. "Our Asian division has doubled its projections." The board couldn't be happier. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that both the Stewart acquisition and the Asian expansion were my carefully orchestrated moves, executed through a network of shell companies and investment firms I'd built over the past decade. While they thought I was finding myself in various minor consulting jobs, I had quietly accumulated enough shares and influence to control Harrison Global's future. "And you, Alexandra?" My mother's voice dripped with familiar disappointment. "If consulting?" I took a measured sip of wine. "Still consulting, mother. You know," Michael leaned forward with fake concern, "there's always a place for you at Harrison Global. Entry-level, of course. You'd have to work your way up like everyone else." I suppressed a smile, thinking of the documents waiting in my office. Tomorrow's board meeting would reveal that the mysterious investor who'd been buying up Harrison Global shares wasn't some foreign investment group as they suspected, but their own failure of a daughter. "That's very kind," I replied softly, "but I'm comfortable where I am." "Comfortable?" Father scoffed. "The Harrisons aren't comfortable. We're leaders, innovators. Well, most of us." He looked pointedly at me. "At least 2 of my children understand the value of ambition." Victoria reached over to pat my hand. "Don't worry, Lex. Not everyone is cut out for real business. There's no shame in modest achievements." If they only knew that my modest achievements included controlling interest in 3 major tech companies, a real estate empire that spanned 2 continents, and most importantly 51% of Harrison Global's voting shares, accumulated through years of careful anonymous purchases. "Speaking of business," father continued, "tomorrow's board meeting will be historic. We're announcing a complete restructuring of company leadership. Michael will be taking over as CEO with Victoria as COO." "Really?" I kept my voice neutral, even as I felt the weight of the keycard in my purse. The one that would give me access to the executive floor tomorrow morning before anyone else arrived. "It's time for the next generation to take control," father declared. "Well, the capable generation at least." The table laughed, a practiced sound that had accompanied countless digs at my expense over the years. "Don't worry, Lex," Michael smirked. "Maybe once I'm CEO I can find you a position in HR or something. Somewhere your limitations won't matter too much." I checked my phone discreetly, confirming the message from my lawyer. "All documents prepared for tomorrow. Board members have been privately briefed. Everything is in place." "Thank you, Michael," I said quietly. "I'll keep that in mind." The rest of dinner passed in its usual way, my siblings competing to impress our parents, while I sat silently, listening to them plan the future of a company that was already mine. As the dessert plates were cleared, father raised his glass. "To Harrison Global's future leadership," he toasted. "To those who understand what it means to be a Harrison." Everyone clinked glasses. I raised mine slightly, thinking about tomorrow, about the looks on their faces when they realized that the quiet daughter they'd dismissed for so long had outmaneuvered them all. As we prepared to leave, mother touched my arm. "Darling, don't bother coming to the board meeting tomorrow. It's really just for family. Well, you understand." I smiled, gathering my purse. "Actually, mother, I wouldn't miss it for the world." They had no idea that in less than 12 hours, their perfectly planned future would crumble, and the daughter they called a nobody would take control of everything they held dear. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's waiting for the perfect moment to prove yourself right. As I walked to my car, a modest Audi that concealed its armored exterior, my phone buzzed with a final confirmation. All board members will arrive by 8:30 a.m. Your office is ready. Tomorrow would change everything. And I was more than ready. I arrived at Harrison Global headquarters at 6:30 a.m., hours before the board meeting was scheduled to begin. The security guard barely glanced at my ID, used to seeing me visit my family over the years. He had no idea that the simple consultant he'd been nodding to for a decade was about to become his boss. My private elevator key, acquired months ago through careful planning, took me directly to the executive floor. It was empty exactly as I'd arranged. Walking past the mahogany-lined walls bearing portraits of Harrison's youth, all male, all bearing the same entitled expression, I entered what would soon be my office. My father's nameplate still sat on the massive desk, James Harrison CEO. Next to it lay the agenda for today's meeting, topped with the announcement of Michael's promotion. I replaced both with items from my briefcase. A new nameplate reading Alexandra Harrison CEO, and the true agenda for today's meeting. My phone buzzed. A message from my assistant Sarah. Board members are beginning to arrive. All have confirmed their support. Your father and siblings haven't arrived yet. Perfect. I changed from my usual understated clothes into a custom-made Chanel suit I'd kept hidden in the executive bathroom. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Gone was the quiet, overlooked daughter. In her place stood someone else entirely. Someone who had spent years building an empire while her family was too busy mocking her to notice. At 8:15 I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Michael and Victoria, arriving early to prepare for their big moment. Is that light on in Dad's office? Victoria's voice carried through the door. Probably the cleaning staff, Michael dismissed. Come on, let's go over the announcement one more time. I smiled, remembering all the times they'd dismissed my presence just as easily. In 30 minutes they'd never make that mistake again. By 8:45 the boardroom was filling up. Through the executive suite's private viewing window, I watched my family enter. Father took his usual seat at the head of the table, Michael and Victoria flanking him like royal heirs. Mother sat in the observers section, already dabbing her eyes in anticipation of her children's crowning achievement. At precisely 9 a.m. my phone lit up with Sarah's message, everyone's present. It's time. I took a deep breath, gathered my documents and opened the door to the boardroom. The conversation died instantly. Alexandra. My father's voice carried equal parts shock and anger. What are you doing here? And in my office. Good morning, everyone, I said calmly, walking to the head of the table. Please take your seats. We have a lot to cover today. This is ridiculous. Michael stood up. Security. Sit down, Michael. Bernard Walsh, our longest-serving board member, spoke up. You'll want to hear this. What's going on? Father demanded, his face reddening. Bernard, what is the meaning of this? I placed my folders on the table. Over the past 5 years, a mysterious investment group has been acquiring Harrison Global shares through various shell companies and private equity firms. As of last month, this group controlled 51% of all voting shares. Victoria laughed nervously. What does this have to do with you? The investment group, I continued, sliding documents across the table, is wholly owned by AH Ventures. NA Ventures. I paused, enjoying the moment, is wholly owned by me. The silence that followed was deafening. Mother's hand flew to her pearls. Michael's face went pale. Victoria's perfect composure cracked. That's impossible, Father whispered. We would have known. Would you? I raised an eyebrow. When was the last time any of you actually looked at what I was doing? When did you ever see past your assumptions about the quiet daughter who couldn't possibly amount to anything? The board has already been briefed, Bernard added. We've verified everything. Alexandra's ownership is legitimate and complete. While you were all busy broadcasting your success, I continued, I was building something real. Every major decision this company has made in the last 3 years, the Stewart acquisition, the Asian expansion, all of it was orchestrated by me, through my network of companies and investments. You can't do this, Michael stood again, his voice shaking. Dad, tell her she can't do this. Actually, I pressed a button and the wall screen came to life showing Harrison Global's complete ownership structure. I already have. As majority shareholder, I'm exercising my right to restructure company leadership, effective immediately. I turned to my father, whose face had gone from red to ashen. James Harrison, you're hereby removed as CEO of Harrison Global. Security will escort you to clear out your office. Though technically, I glanced back at what was now my office, I've already done that for you. The next few minutes were chaos. Michael shouted threats about lawsuits. Victoria burst into tears. Mother appeared to be praying. But through it all, I remained standing at the head of the table, watching the carefully constructed hierarchy of my family crumble. One more thing, I added, sliding final documents across the table. A complete audit of company practices under previous leadership. I think the SEC will find the results very interesting. Father, who had been silent, finally found his voice. Why? He asked simply. Why do this to your own family? I looked at him, remembering all the years of dismissal, of being treated as less than, of watching my siblings receive opportunities one had to fight for. Family. I replied quietly. When was I ever really family to any of you? The aftermath of the board meeting unfolded exactly as I'd planned. Security escorted my father from the building while Michael and Victoria were moved to small offices on different floors. Not fired, but demoted to positions more suited to their actual abilities rather than their last name. Mother tried emotional manipulation first. How could you do this to your family? She sobbed in my new office. We gave you everything. Everything. I looked up from reviewing quarterly reports. You gave Michael and Victoria everything. Me. You gave me doubt, dismissal, and constant reminders of how I'd never measure up. We were trying to motivate you. No, I corrected her. You were trying to control me. There's a difference. Next came Michael's attempt at reconciliation. He arrived at my office with his usual smug smile, though it wavered when his old keycard didn't work and he had to be announced by security. Come on, Lex, he cajoled. We can work something out. Kovis maybe? Keep it in the family. Like you kept me in the family? I pulled up his performance records on my tablet. Your successful projects were all orchestrated by my shell companies. Without my guidance, your decisions cost Harrison Global millions. His smile disappeared. You planned this all along. Every time you sat quietly at dinner listening to us talk business. I was learning, I finished for him. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every bit of arrogance that made you careless. You taught me exactly how not to run a company. Victoria tried a different approach, arriving with tears and designer shopping bags. Remember when we were little? How close we were. You mean before you started telling everyone I was the family disappointment? Before you took credit for my ideas because nobody would believe they came from me? She flinched. I was wrong. We all were. But we're still family. Family, I said quietly, doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. The business world was less interested in family drama and more impressed by results. Under my leadership, Harrison Global's stock rose 40% in the first quarter. My innovative management style and focus on sustainable growth attracted positive attention from investors and analysts. 6 months after the takeover, I sat in my office reviewing acquisition proposals when Sarah announced an unexpected visitor. My father. He looked older, smaller somehow without his CEO title. The Asian expansion, he said without preamble. That was brilliant. Risky but brilliant. Thank you, I replied carefully. All these years, he continued, we thought we were teaching you about business. But you were the one teaching us a lesson, weren't you? I stood and walked to the window looking out over the city skyline. I learned plenty from you, Dad. I learned that true power doesn't come from intimidation or titles. It comes from patience, from watching and waiting for the right moment. And now, he asked, what happens to the family now? I turned back to him. That depends. Are you ready to build something real this time? Not based on name or privilege, but on actual merit. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're offering me a chance to earn my place. Everyone gets that chance now, I explained. Michael and Victoria are learning to succeed on their own merits. No more shortcuts, no more entitlement. Just honest work and real results. A month later I hosted a different kind of family dinner. Not at Le Maison, but in my penthouse apartment, the one I'd owned for years but kept secret. Michael arrived without his expensive watch, Victoria wearing something understated. Mother left her designer labels at home and Father sat at the far end of the table, experiencing for the first time what it felt like to be on the outside. To Harrison Global, I raised my glass, the same vintage for everyone this time. And to New Beginnings. They raised their glasses uncertainly, these people who had once been so sure of their position in life. Now they were learning what I had known all along, that true success isn't about what you're given, but what you build for yourself. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in my home office looking at an old family photo. We looked perfect on the surface. The successful parents, the ambitious siblings, and me, the quiet one in the background. Nobody looking at that photo would have guessed that the overlooked daughter would end up owning it all. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Forbes wants to do a cover story. The Silent CEO, How Alexandra Harrison Built an Empire in Secret. I smiled, thinking of all the family dinners where I'd sat quietly, letting them believe what they wanted about me. Sometimes the greatest power comes not from proving people wrong, but from waiting for the perfect moment to prove yourself right. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I arrived at Harrison Global early as usual. The security guard nodded with new respect, and the elevator carried me to my floor. My floor, earned through years of careful planning and quiet determination. On my desk sat the latest company reports. Record profits, expanding markets, and a corporate culture transformed. Next to them lay a small silver frame holding a new family photo, taken at last night's dinner. We weren't perfectly posed this time, no practice smiles or power positions. Just a family learning, finally, that success comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest voice in the room has the most to say. I picked up my father's old nameplate, now just a reminder of how much had changed. The best revenge, I murmured, isn't taking everything they had. It's building something better than they ever imagined. And that's exactly what I did.